Brace yourself.
Hamish, you are live with Eric and Jamie.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. I discovered this show from the call screeners of the Atheist Experience.
Yes.
Maybe it's new.
Should we
They recommended I call in.
Mm.
I am deeply disturbed, in a sense, by the propagation of the atheist movement. I think that atheists have no basis for morals.
Mm.
Okay.
Have you been a fan of... I know that you've called in a few times to the Atheist Experience and have seen it a few times. Have you seen any of the numerous times that this question has been addressed by the host? We're happy to address it again.
Don't ruin this for me.
I'm not going to. I'm just wondering where the starting point is.
Well, I find it curious how their hosts always hang up whenever the callers destroy them.
Really? Well, let's have
I have watched a whole lot of the Atheist Experience. I think I may have missed those episodes.
Well, you're biased, of course.
Of course.
Of course. Of course.
So from whence do the atheists derive their morals?
Same place you do, right?
God.
So
Nope.
there are so many different parts to it.
So to be clear, it's important to believe and serve God because that is what is right and best for humanity and humans to do, right? Like that's a good thing for humans to do. That's what's right for our souls is a statement that you would agree with in part, at least.
We must serve God because it is His will.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it is bad and sinful for us not to, and good and virtuous for us to, presumably.
Absolutely.
Right.
Indeed.
So a moral system structured without the existence of a God is structured that way, but without the God part. So instead of sin and virtue being determined by divine command or dictate, or as Matt Slick attempts to apologetic his way around it, without getting all of the what values do we hold being obedience, generally human flourishing and human well-being, a focus on what is best for humanity is the major difference between a moral system based on divine dictate and a moral system that focuses directly, without the middleman of a belief in God, on humanity. If that makes sense, or if I need to elaborate on detail.
I feel as though you are simply regurgitating atheist babble, because what would you consider to be a sin?
I wouldn't generally. I would. Well, the word brings with it a lot of baggage that...
So you have no morals then? You don't believe in sin? You don't believe in right and wrong?
No.
You don't? You admit it?
No, I don't. So the problem that we're having here is a difference in language and not in concept. What you're describing as sin, presumably you mean things that are wrong.
Things that are wrong and offensive to the law.
Having morality doesn't depend on the use of the word sin. If that helps clear up that one sort of miscommunication.
I mean, if we take it apart, right? If you were to weigh them out, I mean, in the Bible you have murder being a sin, right? But at the same time, the sin of Onan is to spill one's seed without it being used for recreation, right? Masturbation or using
procreation. You mean?
Thank you. Yeah, that one.
They also oppose spilling of seed for recreation.
Yes. So would you say those things are equivalent, right? Murdering somebody and masturbating?
I believe you are taking that out of context shamefully.
Well, teach me.
What is the correct context for that so that we can not be incorrect twice?
Well, I don't have my Bible with me at present, but off by heart, I seem to recall that Onan, he was supposed to bear his brother's child.
By sleeping with his brother's wife.
Well, yes, but his brother had died.
Yeah, that was the cultural practice at the time.
So is
Right,
it
so
sinful for
it-
them not to do this?
Well, I think that we could agree that in the structure of morality as understood by modern Christianity of the story of the Bible, what made it sinful was that it wasn't what God wanted.
Well, indeed.
Yeah. So I don't see, oh, I will obey whatever commands I'm given as a real moral system.
So my foundation is God. Your foundation is what humans want.
No, what is best for human flourishing, generally.
Define flourishing.
Well, let's. Okay, so I think there are two parts to it, right? There's the cultural part of ethics and morality, and then there's the part that has evolved with us, right? We can point towards things that are in the brain, right? Have you read about what are the neurons in the brain that
Mirror neurons?
Mirror neurons. Have you checked that out at all, Hamish?
They're involved in empathy.
Yeah. Do you know how?
They cause you to experience what others experience to a rough extent.
So if you were to wonder, why would we have mirror neurons? The answer would be that if you take a look at any social species, looking out for each other is also important to looking out to yourself, right? You have this tribe, and you need to take care and grow that tribe. So that is an inbuilt piece of morality that we can point to, right? The rest is the way you structure your culture.
Social norms form around what is generally best, which is why every society that I'm aware of in every part of the world that I've looked into societies existing in has rules that ban murdering people, generally, because
I have read that these neurons promote racism, amongst other things.
I have no idea where you would have read that at all. But I haven't seen them marching in any parades for racism or what have you.
These neurons, they fire more strongly when you see someone who is more like yourself.
Oh.
Yeah, so when people have the idea that there's a difference between me and someone else based on a social construct that we now refer to as race, yes, that affects the way that people see the world, which is why we should oppose an idea that is based solely on social norms. So a problem that we created for ourselves as humans, which we now refer to as racism. The idea that someone that doesn't look enough like me is therefore different, or a different kind of person, or a different breed, or a different race, has caused a lot of separation in the world, right? In the same way that saying, oh, that other person, they're not like me, they have a different religion, has caused a lot of pain and suffering in the world.
Essentially, tribalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tribalism comes from, in part, these neurons. Because they make you prefer your own tribe. They make you prefer one similar to yourself.
So no, mirror neurons would be the thing that would conflict with arbitrary divisions between human beings. They fire even when social norms dictate, no, that other person isn't like you. No, that's a Protestant and you're a Catholic. They should die.
Oh, I have read that they fire less when the person is a different skin color, for instance.
I've actually
because the person whose neurons are firing believes that other person with a different skin color is different.
Perhaps you are mixing up cause and effect.
I believe that you are doing the same as well. So it's very much like saying, oh, empathy causes racism because someone feels less empathy for a person of a different race. Therefore, empathy causes racism. And I'm saying, no, racism gets in the way of empathy. No, racism affects the ability of mirror neurons to view other people as people.
Some certain atheist philosophers, such as Paul Bloom, have decried empathy as something rather foul and misleading when it comes to morals.
I've actually never heard of this person. Have you, Jamie?
Well,
No, but I would say
So-
that empathy, the idea that empathy is foul or
Yeah.
displeasing for morals.
I actually wouldn't want you to put those words in our mouths because
Let me explain that.
Well, no, I don't want to. That's
well,
not something that I believe.
It's I agree. Well, presumably, I agree with you that that idea is counter to a system of good morals. Well, I'm not entirely sure, because if a moral system is structured entirely on obedience, then whether or not a person feels empathy or sympathy is irrelevant to a moral system based on commands from a god, isn't it?
Empathy convinces a person to care more about the suffering of one little girl trapped in a well than all of the continent of Africa. Because it lets you put a face on it. Because people get involved in these media stories surrounding individuals who have some problem with them, and there are studies about this which confirm
it's interesting to notice the limitations of human sympathy when they're addressed in large concepts like there are people starving and malnourished that don't have access to clean water in Africa. Doesn't resonate with a human being as easily as actually seeing that person suffering. However, again, if your moral system is, I will do whatever God commands, then how you feel would be irrelevant. Whether or not you care about other people would be irrelevant. What would matter is whether or not a God told you to care about another person.
But empathy is also clearly flawed in itself as the basis for a moral system.
I would say flawed is the wrong word. I would say limited.
And that's okay.
Then why is it that people have more empathy for one child starving than two children starving, as demonstrated in experiments with advertising?
They don't. They have more sympathy with suffering that is presented to them in a more visceral way. If you show someone a video of two children suffering, and then you show them a video of one person suffering, which is not what the study that you just described tested, there wouldn't be a reason that they wouldn't favor the two people over one. I'm sorry, I'm not sure where you're coming from with this. Presumably you feel empathy generally, even though it's not a part of your moral system and it wouldn't affect whether or not you feel that it's right to help another person.
Perhaps.
Okay.
Yes, I feel empathy.
Okay.
So,
Here, I'll let you jump in here.
actually, I want to kind of
Take it
bring
back
this
a bit.
in. Yeah, because we may need to
Yeah, well, I mean,
do a longer show than an hour. 'Cause we just have so many good callers.
Well, that, and I feel like the long form of our show. Sorry, Hamish, we're getting slightly derailed. We'll get right back to it.
give it just a sec.
The meaning of long form, which I think people understood to mean, oh, they mean they're going to take calls for longer, or oh, they mean their show's going to go on for 5 hours, is that we're going to have longer conversations in segments throughout the week. So it's the repeat callers. So Hamish, even though I know we're going to talk for probably another maybe 10 minutes or something, I can tell you right now we're going to want you to call back in next week as well, because we have so much to talk about.
We do.
But then, assuming that, we can't force you to spend your time talking to us.
Sure.
Well, I can certainly show these studies to you which show that empathy is bizarrely and ludicrously faulty.
So
I would say that there's an email address that you can send those studies to, which is mail@talkheathen.com.
That's right.
Well, Sam Harris,
my
you're
question for you,
him.
Hamish. My question for you right now is, I'm really glad that you're looking into the science. That's a great place to start. What kind of the disconnect for me is how you can look into all of this and yet not take that same critical eye to what you think the answer is, right? You just say, it comes from God, done. And then all of the other studies, well, this says more of this and this says more of that. I think that having this discussion about mirror neurons, having this discussion about cultural and societal norms, that goes so much further into being able to pin down and identify how we behave towards each other as human beings, doesn't it?
Okay, well, what if I empathize more with a robot than a human? Doesn't that reveal empathy to be flawed?
No.
But then, so it's okay for me to care more for a robot than a human?
If your moral system is based on what a God commands, wouldn't it matter only whether God commanded that you care more about a robot than a human?
Well, now you're simply challenging my moral system.
You're correct. I'm just sort of, I'm wondering, the way that you phrased the question demonstrates that you know that there's an aspect of empathy that causes humans to care about humans.
Yes.
Which is why you would which was why you've said here's a hypothetical where a person is using empathy to not care about human beings. And the point that you're right, badly trying to demonstrate right now is that you keep coming back to implicitly an idea that human beings should care about human beings.
Well, you agree with that?
Yes, because of the foundation of our moral system.
Well, I'm challenging your moral system while using it.
Yes.
Okay, so...
And I'm saying that in the basis of that, you're understanding that empathy generally works in causing human beings to care about other human beings. And I'm saying that even though that's not always perfect, that's a good basis for a moral system.
Good start.
Yeah.
It's a good piece.
It's not the entirety of it. A moral system that doesn't have a one-word, three-letter answer is complicated.
If you're willing to concede that empathy is highly flawed, then that's fine.
I feel like highly flawed is interesting. I would say that it's not sufficient to create a moral system. But yeah, I can agree with you that a moral system that was just, oh, humans have empathy and that's all they need would be highly flawed. But that would
My empathy might tell me to care more about my cat than about 500 children in Africa. Empathy is by no means perfect.
No.
I agree with you. Empathy is by no means perfect.
Highly flawed.
I would say that the ability of a human being to innately feel empathy, particularly in our interconnected world today, is not a sufficient basis for a moral system.
Because it's highly flawed.
Again, the only reason that I'm not using that specific phrase is that I think you're using it to mean something that isn't what I'm agreeing with.
It's far from a perfect basis.
I agree that it is far from a perfect basis. If that's what you mean, then I agree with that statement.
And you're implying, I'm sorry. But
No, go ahead.
You're implying that your answer is perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
God is perfect by definition.
That's exactly what you say. That's cool.
Isn't that highly flawed, given that two human beings can entirely disagree about it and decide to kill each other over it?
Well, I'm perfectly happy to answer that. But first, I would like you to admit that empathy is highly flawed.
I have agreed with the idea that you've summarized. I'm not sure what part of the idea you've tried to communicate that I haven't agreed with.
I mean, okay, it's not perfect, right? We said it's a block. So what? Okay, I admit that empathy, as far as mirror neurons are concerned, don't wrap everything up in a bow. Fantastic.
If you want to say,
so what?
Look, if you want to argue that your morality requires many ingredients, of which empathy is merely one, that's fine.
Yes.
I must admit that empathy alone is highly flawed.
Who said that it wasn't?
Yeah.
You haven't been answering.
Well, okay. So the problem is with the phrasing, because what you're saying in the first sentence is a moral system based on empathy alone is flawed, or is insufficient, is bad. I forget which word that is. Therefore, empathy is flawed. Those are two separate things. It's very much like saying a car alone isn't sufficient to take you on a road trip. Therefore, cars aren't helpful in road trips. They are. You just also need snacks and a change of clothes and a destination and a plan.
It's not that moral systems based on empathy alone are flawed, therefore empathy is flawed. It's empathy is flawed, therefore moral systems based on empathy alone are flawed.
Yes, and I don't agree necessarily on that, right? In the same way that a person trying to take a road trip with a car can take a wrong turn and get lost, that doesn't mean that the car is flawed. The way that a human being can use a car can lead to problems and what we would agree is immoral acts.
And I mean, if
It's not only sociopaths that do things that are bad, right? People who do feel empathy generally can also be made or find themselves committing genocide. Not to, wow, dark tone immediately.
Go ahead, Hamish.
Sorry.
Suppose you are in a hospital and your daughter is injured, and you have the choice of either making the doctor treat her immediately or allowing 500 people to get treated immediately. Your empathy might tell you to save your daughter, but moral reasoning may tell you the 500 people are more important.
So here's my question to you. How does your view on morality inform your decision that is different from the way we would look at that? What is so different from your version of morality that it would come up with a completely different answer? I mean, walk me through that.
I could answer that, but I feel like you're dodging the question.
We've answered the question that you've asked I think, three different ways.
Look,
yes, empathy is not sufficient. Yes, the use of only empathy does not provide you with a sufficient moral system to go about your life making moral decisions.
Just because
your hypothetical demonstrates a situation that requires more than empathy alone.
Exactly.
And just because it's not exactly the answer that you want in a soundbite doesn't mean we didn't answer it. So the question is, how does your morality inform you in a way that's different from the way that we would make a moral judgment? How would you stand in that hospital and make that decision? Because why?
Because I am not using empathy, but rather the Lord as a basis for my ethics.
How are you using the Lord?
He is my guide and my shepherd.
How does he guide you? By what method do you determine what his guidance is telling you what to do?
We have the Bible. We have the scripture.
Okay, so you read the Bible and then determine what that says about a decision in a hospital about choosing between your daughter and 500 sick people, or 500 people that need treatment.
In perhaps a less direct way, indeed.
All right. Is there a way that the Bible informs that decision? Because I would actually be very interested in doing that. I know that you, as you've said earlier in this call, that you don't have your Bible with you. But again, because we're going to end up revisiting some of these questions next week, it would be interesting to hear a more substantial answer to that question. I didn't want to put you on the spot if you can't give a perfect moral answer to this moral dilemma now.
Well, if I have my daughter tied to a rail track, and there are also 500 strangers tied to a rail track, and I have to choose between one and the other, that is a decision which I am deeply uncomfortable answering at present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like, what I wanted to emphasize was that I'm not trying to get a gotcha moment in that you don't have the entire Bible memorized to use this, which is why I was saying that would be a good question to have an answer for next week.
I understand that. Now, let me turn this on you. So, is it better?
Hold on, I think Eric had a point.
And just so you know, we're coming up on the end of things, so we are going to need to move this conversation into next week if you call.
Yeah. Hamish, are you able to call back next week?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And then do you have the email that we said at that point to have, brief sort of communications in between now and then?
You want to give me an email?
Yeah, so that we can keep in touch in the lead up to next week's call.
I gave my email to the call screener.
Perfect.
All right. Well, then we'll reach out to you.
And thank you for calling in, Hamish. And
very well.
We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, that was good. See, that's why.
Yeah. Sorry. I
love.
I took up a lot of. I know that you are much more excited to talk to him than I was.
No, just listening. I love it. We're gonna have more opportunities.
It's gonna be good.
What really.
And Hamish, if you are still watching, thank you for calling in.
Yeah.
We do appreciate your time.
And Hamish, what really gets me is that there are a lot of people who can justify poor decisions by saying that they read it in the Bible.
Well, we shouldn't
the fact is that
argue too much after he's hung up. I know that I took up so much of that time.
Yeah,
that you
that's
wanted
true.
to-
That's true. That's true.
Sorry, I'll let you.
I'll
first and last
talk
answer.
about post hoc rationalizations afterward, or on the next show.
That sounds like a reason that you just came up with on the fly to justify your decisions. Sorry.
almost like a post hoc rationalization.
Yeah, almost like you came up with the reason after the